something with you this afternoon that I believe is one of the most provocative subjects probably that I have ever treated in my 37 years in the ministry. I dare say that what you'll hear this afternoon will get you outside your comfort zone. You will hear some things, and I'm making a very bold statement. You will hear some things that you've never heard before. And I'm asking you to indulge me, if you will, until the end of the teaching before you make a decision regarding whether or not you can believe this. And I challenge you not to take my word for it, but I do challenge you to go back and measure it against Abba's word. 2 Timothy 2:15 says, "Study to show yourselves approved unto Yahweh, workmen that need not to be ashamed." And the only way that you can keep from being ashamed, and say that word with me, ashamed, it's going to be a very key word in today's teaching. The only way I can keep from being ashamed is to rightly divide the word of truth. And I've spent 37 years attempting to do that. I am by no means perfect, and I know that we've been challenged as we've tried to extract this word. I don't take this lightly. I sit down at my desk to hear what I believe is a word that Abba's given me first. And I have to walk this word out before I can bring this word to you. And it becomes a mechanism, a measuring device in my own personal life. And so if I share something with you this afternoon that may kind of provoke you and maybe stir up a little angst and get you into a place where maybe you've got some acid indigestion that develops when you hear some of this, then please remember that this word is for me first. And if you can, thank you, I appreciate that. And if you can grasp a hold of it, I believe that your life from this day forward will not be the same. Never in the history of man's creation have we been assaulted spiritually like we are being now. Never. Never. I believe, and some may disagree, but I believe part of Revelation chapter 12 is being fulfilled right now as we speak. I believe that the enemy has been cast down to the lower heavens with all of his cohorts for the express purpose, knowing that his time is short, to torment, if he can, to bring confusion and division in the body of Mashiach, if he can. Never has mankind's mental faculties been assaulted, never like now. Never has there been the capability to assault the mind of man like there is now. Everywhere you turn, there's electromagnetic frequencies that are being released in the air with the express purpose of manipulating your mind, massaging your thinking. And if it can change your mind, change your thinking, then it can change the DNA on the inside of you. And as it does that, it can also change what comes out of you, your circumstances, and get you off of the Word of God that has been given to you. I believe that he has an express purpose for every one of you sitting in this house, those that are listening live via the internet. Abba has a plan for you. And regardless of where you are right now, you may be hurting, you may be sick, you may be diseased, you may be broken, you may be wounded, you may be grieved. But Jeremiah 29:11 says this, Abba speaking in the first person, I have plans for you. Did you hear what I said? Sure, the enemy has plans for you as to the direct proportion that the word is on the inside of you. But Abba says, I have plans for you. And those plans are for good and not for evil. It may look as if you're in the middle of an evil scheme, an evil plan, but Yahweh says if you belong to him, his plans are calling what you're in right now good. And the purpose of allowing you to go through whatever it is you're in right now, won't you just kind of squirm a little bit, okay? Whatever you're in right now, he's allowing it to happen to bring you to an express destination. Your destiny is going to be determined by how you react right now. And if you act flippantly, frivolously, if you're quick to fly off the handle, if you're quick to give vent to your emotions, if you're quick to allow pressure to cause you to make a decision, your decision is going to be W-R-O-N-G, wrong. Pressure can help me to make a decision, but if pressure forces you and your emotions, your intellect force you to make a decision regarding the plan of Yahweh in your life, your flesh is a liar. But your flesh is not the culprit. Are you hearing me? You're going to find out who the real culprit is in your life. And I challenge you this afternoon to listen to this Torah teaching. The title of it is Mishpatim, and it literally means judgments or statutes. And I want to kind of set the stage for you if I'm allowed. And I know that I don't know how long this may go, but I'm asking you to indulge me, if you will, to if you have to, stand up like that woman stands up over there so that you can get your flesh under control and you can hear what's about to be shared. Listen to me. This is what Abba dropped in my spirit this week. My flesh will never be perfect this side of creation, but I can be perfect in this flesh. And if you want to be perfect in this flesh, you tell your flesh what it has to do. You tell your flesh that it has to hear the word of Yahweh. You tell your flesh to be patient in times of trouble. You tell your flesh to stand on the word of Yahweh. It will not fail. You tell your flesh that his word is what dictates where I'm headed. That's your mission. And if you choose to accept it, it will chart the course of your destiny. Amen. Mishpatim. The children of Israel have come out of 400 years of bondage. They're here at Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai is the place where everything in creation began. This is a place where Yahweh created Adam and Eve, brought them into a place where they could reproduce the sons of Elohim in the earth. He wanted to cohabitate with them. His original plan was to dwell with us, in us. His plan hasn't changed. He brought them here to Mount Sinai to change their mind, to keep them from thinking like slaves, to keep them from being in bondage even though their fleshly body had been liberated. Did you hear what I just said? So he gives them what we know as the 10 words or the 10 commandments, the ketuvim, the ketubah, if you will, the words, the terms of the marriage contract. And they wholeheartedly agree, saying, all that you have said we will do, without ever seeing it written down. And then he begins to give them this Torah portion, the Mishpatim, the judgments. And everything that you find here is going to be predicated on Yahweh's purpose for mankind. Listen to me. What you're reading here regarding the children of Israel 3,000 years ago was not so much for them as it is specifically for this generation that is alive right now. You're about to see Mishpatim fulfilled in your life. Do you want it? It begins in Exodus chapter 21, verse 1 through chapter 24, verse 18. And there's a renowned Jewish midrash on this parsha that says Yahweh offered the Torah to each of the 70 nations. Listen to me, and you'll see that you probably will fit into this category. It says that the original 70 nations declined because rather than agree to the Torah, they needed to know everything in it first. I need to know before I can agree. I need to know the intimate details before I can be obedient. Say amen. Basic human nature is such, I have to know everything. After hearing the commandments, each of those 70 nations had an excuse for not accepting. Why? Because I need to know it all. I need to know the end results. I need to know that whatever I've been praying for is going to happen before I see it. Are you listening to me? I want tangible results. How many of you have had a word from Yahweh and you haven't seen the results in the natural yet? All of us in here. I need to know the plan. I need to know why this is not happening. It's interesting. It was said regarding the children of Israel that they chose the Torah before they ever knew its contents, just like a child who would trust his father. And even though it's in my notes, even though this is a time-honored explanation, the actions of Israel after this seem to kind of dispute that fact. Amen? Because they still remain a belligerent, obstinate, rebellious, stiff-necked, hard-hearted, easily swayed, double-minded, unstable as water group of Hebrew roots. They were the original. Say amen. Turn to your neighbor and tell them it's in your DNA. So I have to change my DNA. Am I right? So what we see here is a group of individuals that are plagued with a rebellious, self-gratifying, listen to me, and carnal appetite. And yet Yahweh has brought them here to the base of this mountain to reunite himself with them in a union of intimacy that can only be understood basically from what we see with the relationship of Adam and Eve in Genesis chapter 2 and chapter 3. And so I want to find out, how did Yahweh deal with these spoiled children? And was there a remedy for this rebellious, hard-hearted, vacillating, stiff-necked, easily confused, easily overwhelmed, up and down, sideways at times, overwhelmed group of individuals? Is there help for us? Is there a remedy? I believe that the giving of the law and these Mishpatim are just that. And as we look at these Mishpatim, they're kind of segregated from what we know as or understand as the 10 words or 10 commandments back in Exodus chapter 20. And these are some supplemental instructions that are normally defined as being civil laws or obligations for the people or upon the people as a whole. But what intrigued me as I sat down to do this, and this is how Yahweh teaches me, and I have to apologize if it's foreign to you, but I just have to give you what he gives me the way he gives it to me. And if I'm not able to deliver it properly, then I apologize in advance. But this is just what he gives me. And as I'm sitting here looking at the current situation, the children of Israel are already arguing and fussing, and there's already division and strife in the camp, and yet Yahweh's brought them here for the express purpose of being intimate with them. Sounds like a Sabbath day, doesn't it? Hello? We've already had that happen here this morning. We had someone just get so upset, wouldn't even come talk to me, just decided to leave. And I have absolutely no why, no understanding why. And so I can just imagine if it's compounded by a spiritual inundation that the enemy's unleashing, it's any wonder that any of us are stable in our faith. Say amen. And so I wanted to look at this peculiar setting. Moshe's here on top of the mountain in the presence of Yahweh in order to receive some instructions for you as a group of people, this final generation. These instructions, these Mishpatim are for you. Okay? And so I wanted to go back and look at it. We know what Moshe's name literally means. In Hebrew, it's one from out of whom the water is drawn. And it says back here in chapter 20, not where we're at now in Exodus 21, but back in chapter 20, it says that Yahweh is in a specific location on the mountain, and that Yahweh is dwelling, listen to me, in thick darkness. And Moshe approaches the thick darkness on behalf of the people in order to hear a word from Yahweh that will be a remedy for the malady of rebellion and confusion and carnality that has assaulted them. And so I thought, oh my goodness, what is this condition? Where is this place where Yahweh would dwell, this thick darkness? And I go back to the original Hebrew language and I look at that word in the Hebrew language. It's a phrase, but it actually comes from one word, Strong's number 6205. It's the word arafel, And it's the place where Yahweh is abiding, and yet Moshe has stepped into that same venue on behalf of the people. And so I thought, there's something that's going on here. And if I don't understand what's happening at this particular location, I may not have a proper understanding of the necessity for giving the 10 Commandments, much less these civil laws, these Mishpatim. And so I wanted to go back and look at it. And just as a slight segue, you understand that the first 4 commandments give us insight regarding how to relate specifically to Yahweh mano a mano, one-on-one, right? The latter 6 are said to deal specifically with our relationship with each other, okay? And so I had to ask myself, if that's the case, these Mishpatim deal with civil life. More so our relationship, how we engage each other on a daily basis, than it does my personal vertical relationship with Yahweh. Does that make sense? And so if that's the case, it seems as if, hear me well, it seems as if there's much more emphasis that's placed on how we treat others as the measuring device of a true relationship with Yahweh than how we say we love Him. Are you listening to what I just said? How many of you, and you can raise your hand if you got enough backbone. There's one already. He knows where I'm going with it. There's another one, my future son-in-law, and didn't even know what I was about to ask. How many of you have ever been offended with me? Gotcha. You know what? The opportunity for offense will be here almost on a probably an hour-by-hour basis, and the offense is something that you choose to either get upset about or discard based on our relationship one with another. If my wife offends me, if she says something that I take offense about, the first thing that I should do is stop and understand I have some history with this woman. I know she loves me. I know she has my best interest at heart. And so I need to measure what I'm hearing her say. And if it's constructive criticism, man up, son. Just man up. And so if by times as leadership, listen to me, I did not ask for this job. And I have been harangued as of late to such a degree, I'm looking for doorways to get out. Hello? But it just so happens this is not my job, so I can't quit. This is who I am. This is what I am. I may not be adequate at it, but I can truly say this much. I am doing everything I can to walk out my relationship with Him, but I want it to be demonstrated in how I relate with you. Does this make sense? Mishpatim. Mishpatim. Now, I also want to call you to remembrance regarding Moshe. He is a type of Messiah. Moshe is about to be transfigured. Remember, Yeshua goes upon the Mount of Transfiguration? Moshe did so first because he's a foreshadowing of Messiah. Moshe is about to enter what I believe is a multi-dimensional portal called thick darkness. What is this thick darkness? How does it relate to this Mishpatim, the giving of the judgments? What does thick darkness have to do with the way that I treat Matthew and Mathews' ox that gores one of my servants? You understand what I'm saying? And so there's a generational question that's being posed here that most people have just overlooked and have never considered. And maybe I'm a little bit unique in that when I see these things, it's like a red flag or maybe a red cape. Like, how many of you know what a bullfighter raises? Maybe that's what it is. I have to go after that cape. And so I wanted to know, what is this thick darkness? Why is Yahweh dwelling in thick darkness? And if I can understand what thick darkness entails, why He's there, why He requires Moshe to visit him in order to entreat on behalf of the people, maybe it'll help me to understand why He's giving specific Mishpatim. Wouldn't you like to know? Have you ever thought about it? Tell the truth. No, you haven't. Because I hadn't until now. Well, some of you may have. I'm not trying to be condescending. It's just this staggered me. And I promise you, and if you've already read the notes, you know what I'm about to tell you is the truth. The word Arafel is translated here as thick darkness. It's said to have originated from the root araf, which means to drop, like a faucet that leaks, drip, 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 to trickle, as in someone who's constantly trickling, dripping speech. Turn to your neighbor, tell them, will you please stop? That word oraf is seen in the root of words that indicate the neck or the back. And how many of you have ever heard the phrase, boy, he's got his back bowed, he's got his neck bowed? It indicates stubbornness, obstinacy, rebellion, to turn the back, to show displeasure, and to show shame. But if you do proper diligence, which is your responsibility, it's the glory of Yahweh to hide some things, but it's the obligation of kings to search them out. And if you break that word arafel apart, it has a hidden phrase in here. It has this aleph resh root from the ayin resh root from ayin vav resh, or which is a root that indicates naked. Say that with me. Naked. Naked, if you're from where we're raised. Naked. And then it has the Pei Lamed Aleph. And that word, that root there is Pelah. How many of you remember one of the sons of the patriarchs whose name was Pelah, because in his day the earth was divided? That root there literally means to separate or divide. And so, putting this real simply, there's a connection with this thick darkness and something to do with nakedness. And it seems to me, what does that have to do with the giving of Mishpatim? I believe that Yahweh gave the Torah, the commandments, the Mishpatim, all the way back in Genesis chapter 1, 2, and 3, long before we ever got to Mount Sinai. Are you hearing me? Okay? And so simply put, this word arafel seems to indicate that our condition of nakedness can lead either to separation or division from Yahweh. But if you go back and look at the original naked condition that Adam and Eve were found in Genesis chapter 2, then it's interesting, because there they were actually in union with Yahweh, naked and not ashamed, and in union with Yahweh. Are you hearing me? So what changes? What's changed here? And it's interesting, as we go into chapter 21, the last verse of chapter 20 closes with an admonition to Israel, and they are told, do not build an altar with hewn stones, and when you build it, do not ascend up to the presence of Yahweh and have your nakedness exposed. And so now all of a sudden I'm reading this and I am thoroughly mesmerized. I'm surprised that the smoke alarms didn't go off in my office, because there's smoke coming out of my mind. I'm thinking, what? Yahweh's dwelling in thick darkness, and there's something regarding this thick darkness that's connected with nakedness and division and separation and union. It's all interconnected. Do y'all see that, or am I the only one? And so, from what we've seen thus far, you should be able to surmise that there's a connection between rebellion and obstinacy and that naked condition that first arose in Genesis chapter 3 simply because of a compromise of the marriage bed. Am I right? Am I right? And yet it almost seems as if a contradiction's occurring here, because Yahweh has brought the children of Israel, and in my opinion, they left Egypt in a naked and ashamed condition, because their marital intimacy with Pharaoh had exposed them, just like in Genesis chapter 2 and 3. He brings them now to Mount Sinai, and what is he about to do? He's about to offer them marital intimacy once more. He's about to offer them an opportunity, a means, a device for them to be restored back to the original naked condition. Because it's in that original naked condition of Genesis chapter 2 that they were in union with Yahweh. Am I right? Are you confused yet? Are you having trouble following this? And so as I read this, it seems to me that our perception of what nakedness means has to be challenged for me to understand. Why is Yahweh giving these people some laws and statutes about how to interact with each other? Is it possible that my interactions with you can cause me to be exposed? Isn't that what nakedness sort of is? An exposing of something? Being made bare? Uncloaked, unshielded. And so I'm having to ask this question now, and I'm presenting it to you. Is it possible that the giving of the law, the 10 Commandments in 19 and 20, and now in 21 forward, the giving of the law and the Mishpatim, is it possible that they're being offered to Israel as a means of restoring their original pristine, naked condition where unity was being preserved in Genesis chapter 2? Remember, they were naked and shamed coming out of Israel because the marriage bed's been defiled. But yet Yahweh wants to restore them to the place where they were naked and not ashamed. Is that making sense? And I'm asking myself as I'm preparing this, what's going on here? And so I began to just look at this word for thick darkness, this word autophel, and I began to try and connect the dots and flesh this thing out so that I could get a picture of what's trying to take place inside my mind, get it from here to where I could get a knowing. The word autophel has a numeric value of 380, the same as the Hebrew word Mitzrayim, which means Egypt. And as we looked the last time I was sharing with you, the word for Mitzrayim can literally be translated with that mem prefix as the womb of distress. Did you hear what I said? Yahweh sent Israel down into the womb of distress. How many ladies in the audience that have ever been pregnant? Tell the truth. The womb is a place of distress. You know I'm telling the truth. Am I right? You can be in a spiritual womb and be in a place of distress. And it's also kind of interesting, as a little side note, that numeric value, 380, is the same gematria as the dimensions of the ark, 300 long, 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, 30 cubits high. The word ark there, to avah, is also interesting because if you look at the tav prefix, it connotes a future tense. You shall, he shall, she shall. That beit hay root is a preposition that indicates in her. So all of those that were in the ark, it was there as a future shadow picture of those of us that would be gathered later in a spiritual ark. I submit to you that the body of Messiah is a spiritual ark. And Yahweh, when he gives you that word ta'avah, he's literally making a prophetic declaration. You shall be in her. And so this ark becomes a prophetic declaration of the seed originating in the womb of distress, and the womb can be a place both of thick darkness and nakedness. Follow me. Say this with me. Father, help me to get this. And so, looking at this word autophel and its connection to nakedness, it seems as if the original naked condition, go back, Genesis chapter 2. How many have ever read Genesis chapter 2? Adam and Eve are created as one in Genesis chapter 1. Yahweh takes the body of the man, forms the body, and then takes the woman out of her, and then he takes and puts them back together in a state called the marriage relationship. It's only within the confines of the marriage relationship that Adam and Isha are said to be naked and not ashamed. Are you listening to me? Okay? And so it seems as if that first naked condition becomes a dwelling place for the light of Yahweh's word, his presence. I believe that they were originally clothed with light. I believe that some way this fleshly body could be literally permeated by the light that would exude forth out of them, the light being synonymous with his word. I believe that there should be no limitations on you as a fleshly being. If you're in right relationship with Yahweh, you should still be able to see the light issuing forth out of you. Does that make sense? So both that naked condition and that light garment both seem that they are a garment, if you will, each separate but yet connected of sorts. And it's after that fall that the naked skin garment of Adam and Eve changes, listen to me, and it seems then that what happens is that it cloaks the light. And so instead of Adam and Eve walking around in the earth looking at as if they were light beings, just transforming, transferring, moving light from one place to the other, after the fall it seems as if something physiologically happens and they are now clothed with this skin garment. And the light is still in here. You can still put the light in here because Yahweh is light. Those that dwell with Him should dwell in the light, walk in the light. You're children of the light, so you should have the light in here, yet the light is shielded or cloaked, if you will, by this skin garment. Does that make sense? What in the heck does this have to do with the giving of the ketubah and the subsequent judgments that Yahweh is attempting to share with the children of Israel? Is it possible that He's giving them for a purpose, and that purpose is to restore the original intent of the marriage union and to restore that original intimate condition? Listen to me. It's that original condition is only demonstrated one time in Genesis chapter 2:25, and Adam and Eve become the law of first reference. And so it seems to me, and you see if you can agree with this, it seems to me that the terms of the ketubah, the law, the giving of the 10 commandments, if you will, I submit that they're all the same. But for the sake of the parsers, we've segregated them. And these mishpatim, I submit to you that they have to be spoken in order to reproduce and shield us or clothe us. Yahweh's word is my shield, my sword, my buckler. Okay? It's also kind of interesting, since we were looking at the numeric value of Arafel and Mitzrayim and Ta'avah, that there's another word that has the same numeric value of 380, and it's this word that describes my tongue, Lashon. And it's interesting that Lashon has the ability to make me naked and uncovered and exposed before Yahweh in a negative condition, or the ability, as I release the light out of my mouth through the spoken word, to also expose me as a light vessel capable of reproducing the sons of Elohim. Does that make sense? And while I'm looking at this, my eyeballs are like a pinball machine. I'm hearing these things that Yahweh is dropping into my spirit. How many of you have ever studied the Word and had this stuff happen to you? It's just captivating. And I'm looking at this naked and not ashamed condition, and I thought, my goodness, I've got to go back and just break it apart. And I did, and there are 3 simply astounding, mystifying words in the Hebrew language that I promise you, you've seen, but you've not seen. Isn't that amazing? We're talking about nakedness. And they were both, say this word, both, naked, and the man and his wife, and were not ashamed. Say that with me, ashamed. The word here for both is the Hebrew word shenayim, which indicates 2, in other words, 2 beings, Adam and Isha, twice, to repeat. But it's interesting, it actually comes from a root shana, which means not only to repeat, to alter and change, but to disguise oneself and then to transfer into another place or change the condition. Remember, Adam and Eve had been created as one. He created them, male and female, created he them in Genesis 1, right? Genesis 2, he creates a body for the man, takes the woman out of him, creates another body. Do you see what I'm talking about? They were both in that condition, naked, but yet Yahweh in some fashion chose to disguise himself and deposit himself in the skin of those 2 individuals on the earth for the purpose of taking those 2 individuals and transferring them while they were in this condition into a place where they could reproduce him in the earth. Isn't that what he's supposed to do inside you? Shouldn't he? As you're walking around, shouldn't you literally be a disguise for Elohim yourself? When people see you, they may not recognize it, but Yahweh himself is in here. Say amen. Hallelujah. And it sounds to me like since they had been separated, segregated there from Genesis chapter 1 to Genesis chapter 2, that now what Yahweh's trying to do, he's taken the two separate entities, the man and the Isha, and not only has he told us that they're going to become echad, one in a physical relationship, but it also seems to me as if he's creating the opportunity for a reunion of the two minds, the two souls that were represented by the mind as well within the fleshly marriage unit. She and I have been married 27 years, and we function echad physically, but we're also at the point where we're functioning physiologically and mentally and soulishly as one. Sometimes my thoughts are her thoughts, bless her darling heart, and sometimes hers are mine. There is a reunion of the original Adam and Isha that takes place within the confines of that marriage relationship. Is that making sense? What does this have to do with Mishpatim? You guys are so inquisitive. It looks to me like what Yahweh's doing here is attempting to alter or to change the spiritual and or physical state of Israel here at Sinai, just like he did there in Genesis chapter 2. I believe that what's happened is that he has brought Adam and Eve, we would call them Israel, out of Egypt. He has just formed them a body just like he did the Adam. And now, since he represents the last Adam and Israel represents the Isha, I believe that what Yahweh's plans were was to bring them to the base of Mount Sinai and have a reunion, if you will, in the fleshly realm where the two could come together, consummate the marriage relationship, and produce the sons of Yahweh in the earth. I also believe that Yahweh's intent was to bring Israel to Mount Sinai so that we could have a meeting of the minds, if you will, so that my mind could be conformed to his mind. I would be transformed. My mind would be renewed. I would have the mind of Messiah in me. We would think alike, act alike, and then because of that, we would be transformed into the union that Yahweh called Adam and Eve to be the first place. Is this making sense to you? What does this have to do with the giving of the law and the Mishpatim? Well, it seems then as what's happening here is the current state of being of Adam and Eve has just been altered a little bit from the original creation account. Does that make sense? Both Adam and Isha, she was taken out of him. They were transformed or transferred, if you will, to another physiological state. They were given a physical body. You with me? And I thought, as I was looking at this, while I'm thinking on this, I'm actually also thinking at the same time about the fall. Because after the fall, they are given another garment. Yahweh clothes them with skins. Am I right? Well, isn't it ironic that the same ayin vav resh root for naked is also the root of the word in Genesis 3:21 for skin? And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, they were naked and not ashamed. They sinned there at the fall, and yet Yahweh clothes them with some sort of skin or naked skin garment. I'm thoroughly confused now. Are you with me? Actually, I wasn't confused. I was exhilarated because I'm looking for clues. And let me remind you that throughout the Torah, anytime there's an exchange or changing of garments, it's indicating a change of rank or standing. Aren't we admonished to put on Messiah? Anytime you come individually or collectively in a place where praise and worship is going on, we should literally be endued, if you will, with him. We should literally have put him on. Automatically, your rank in the earth, your standing just changed. You are no longer a physical, carnal being that doesn't have enough power to blow the fuzz off of a peach. You are now a powerful dynamo that has the ability to speak the word and see a mountain be removed and cast into the sea. There's a distinction that has to be made here. And so the reasonable individual, in my opinion, would take 2 and 2 together and say, you know what happened in Genesis chapter 2 and what's happening in Exodus 20 and 21, they're somehow connected. Because, by way of reminder, Adam and Eve were initially clothed with garments, skins of light, right? Skins of light. And it was only within that concept of listen to me carefully, I don't want to overwhelm you. It's only within that concept of a skin-naked package or vehicle that they were capable of reproducing sons or seed of Yahweh. Does that make sense? And so I need to know if I want to come together with him as my husband, the Adam and the Isha, because I stand in that same condition, just like as the husband I stand in that condition with my wife. If I want to learn how to understand how to produce children, seed, then I need to properly understand that naked, intimate condition. Am I right? Yes, yes, yes. Look with me in Genesis chapter 2. This is mind-staggering. It says that Adam and Eve, after he's taken her out of the Adam, he presents her to him. He says, she is bones of my bones. And then there's a statement made. Yahweh himself says that they are naked and not ashamed. Orim velobush. Look at that word. Is it up there? Look at it in the Hebrew. Oh, it's kind of turned around. It should be the Orim, Ayin Resh, Vav Mem, should have been in front of Vav Lamed Aleph, and then Beit Vav Shin should have been on the end. Orim velobush. Say that with me. Orim velobush. But if you fast forward to Genesis 3 after the fall, look at this. Yahweh changes their skin garment again. Am I right? They had some sort of a light garment, and Yahweh changes that and makes them garments or cloaks, if you will, of skins. And that word there is ur, same root as arafel. Are you with me? And then he clothes them, labash. Look at the play on words. You have ur, lavash, versus Orim velobush. It's the same phrase in Hebrew, but there's 2 Hebrew letters that are distinctive and that are missing in Genesis chapter 3 after the fall. Can you see that? If you can see it, shout hallelujah. The difference is the absence in chapter 3 after the fall of 2 letters, the Hebrew letter mem and the Hebrew letter vav. Well, you've studied Hebrew enough to know that the Hebrew letter mem represents the womb. Am I right? Remember, we talked about the value of arafel, 380, the same as Mitzrayim, the womb of distress. You also understand that the Hebrew letter vav represents a connector. The vav represents the vav man, who is the link, if you will, between heaven, the spirit realm, and earth, the natural or fleshly realm. And so if you look at this Orim velobush, this naked and not ashamed condition prior to the fall, it tells us the mem and the vav was there, and so the vav man would have been in the womb. He would have represented the firstborn of Yahweh and the potential for him to be produced in the earth by Adam and Eve in Genesis 2. Do y'all see that? After the fall, the mem and vav are absent. It leads me to believe that there's no womb capable of producing the vav man or the firstborn of Yahweh after the fall. Am I right? Am I right? It can't be accidental. Yahweh just, if you study the Hebrew language, you cannot plumb the depths of it or ascend the height of it adequately. And so his mind is higher than ours. His ways higher than ours. And so the absence in Genesis chapter 3 of the mem and vav cannot be coincidental. The 2 letters reveal to us the eternal conundrum that affects all of mankind. it reveals to us something regarding our inheritance, which comes out of the union that takes place with the seed in the womb. The firstborn of that union should be the seed of Yahweh. But from what we see here, the absence of that mem indicates that he was cut off in the womb. Am I right? So you have to ask yourself, how could that pristine condition, how could the womb be transformed so that the Vav man could be restored? Adam has fallen, and so from Adam forward, there was no perfect flesh and no perfect womb. Am I right? And so it's almost contradictorily, if you look at it here, because after the fall, this just blew my mind. It says that Adam and Eve hide themselves from the voice of Yahweh. Am I right? Go back and read it for yourself. It says that instead of hiding themselves because of their sin, they hide themselves from the voice, and they make the statement that the reason that we're hiding is because we're naked. And I thought, wait a second. They were naked before this, and they were in union with Yahweh. The voice comes here for an intimate relationship. And now all of a sudden they're hiding from him because they realize that they're naked. And then Yahweh's kind of incredulous himself. He said, wait a second. Who told you that you were naked? What's going on here? Have you ever thought about that? They were naked, and it's okay. They're now not naked, and they hide. Adam did not hide himself from Yahweh because of the sin with the serpent. It does not say that. Adam hides himself from Yahweh, he and Isha, Eve, because they realize that they are naked. Naked of what? Exposed of what? Bare of what? Bereft of what? What's missing now that makes me hide myself from Yahweh? And this is, to me, this puzzled me. Does it bother you? I have up here in my notes, are you curious yet? Why would they hide themselves from the voice? Listen to me. How many of you have ever looked at that Hebrew word for voice? What is it? Kol. Not cold as in C-O-L-D. It's kuf, vav, lamed, kol. And it indicates a voice to sound, to call aloud. But listen to this. This blew me away. I've looked at this better than 20 years. That word kol for voice there could also indicate a lightness. In other words, not having a heavy weight on it. And it also can indicate leniency. And when I saw that, I said, wait a minute. The voice is approaching Adam and Eve to offer leniency to them? How and why could that happen? And so I decided I'll look at this word kol in the Hebrew language. Its value is 136. The same phrase that establishes the law of reproduction in Genesis 1, limenu, which indicates everything reproduces after its kind. And so Yahweh has come to Adam and Eve to offer them leniency, to give them an opportunity to reproduce after his kind. Oh, you think, well, that will never happen. How many times has he offered you leniency and you are in a fallen condition? Are you listening to me? As incredulous as it seems, it looks as if the voice comes to offer leniency in spite of this previous sin of Adam and Isha. And so I'm asking you this question. Is it possible that because of the law of reproducing after one's kind, that, listen to me carefully, that Yahweh still had an avenue open, and it remained up until this point that would allow them to be restored to him, and yet instead they hide themselves, not because of the sin, they hide themselves because of some sort of an aberration in a naked condition. Are y'all concerned about what's happened? I'm telling you, everything that's going on here at Mount Sinai regarding the giving of the law and the Mishpatim have to do with exactly what's transpiring right here in Genesis 1, 2, and 3. Yahweh is dwelling in utter fell, thick darkness, in a naked and not ashamed condition, attempting to draw his spouse into that same framework mentally and physically. And yet, after this, after the Sinai encounter, what do we find them doing? We find them worshiping a golden calf. And what does it say later? They are found naked and ashamed before their enemies again. Come on, y'all. This stuff works. And so when I'm sitting, I'm asking myself, what changed from their naked condition in Genesis 2, and how does this relate to Mishpatim? Their current naked condition shows them lacking the mem and the vav. The vav indicates the Messiah or the word that's in the womb. Remember, they've been naked all this time. And I have some question marks up here. If you have some answers, I give you the opportunity to explain it. The Hebrew letter mem, this is interesting. It's the 13th letter of the Aleph Beit. 13 is the numeric value of the word echad and ahava. One indicates unity, the other indicates love. Remember, they were in a unified condition in Genesis chapter 2 in a naked and unashamed place, right? The Hebrew letter vav, if you understand the language of Hebrew, it's the letter that is able to change verbal tense. In other words, if you apply the vav in certain places, it has the ability to change a future tense phrase to a past tense phrase, or a past tense to a future tense phrase. And so the letter vav, listen to me, the letter vav representing the vav man has the ability to affect your past and your future. The letter vav carries eternity inside of it. And that then is the Hebrew letter vav is the letter of repentance. It's the secret of teshuvah. And so what's happened here, Adam and Eve have the ability to make teshuvah, and if they make teshuvah, they can be restored back to unity and love with Yahweh. Does that make sense? I believe that when the voice comes, this is the leniency that he's offering. And yet we find Adam and Eve, it seems as if because there's some sort of an aberrant change in their nature here, that they refuse that. Pay attention to me, because this is important. And because of their refusal, it forces Yahweh then to slaughter the lamb in order to clothe them with skin garments so that they can be restored. This, in effect, sets a law in motion. It opens up the doorway, because Revelation 13:8 says the lamb is slain before the foundation of the world. So this opens up the doorway for the last Adam, hear me well, to enter into the naked condition, this veil of the flesh, this cloak that contains or houses the light. Does that make sense? Yeshua had to come in the same naked and unashamed condition as the first Adam. Are you listening to me? And let me ask you this. I'm just going to put it out here. Did Yeshua come first to restore the flesh? Or was it to ensure that the mind was restored to its original Edenic condition in order that subsequently the flesh could be resurrected? Let this mind be in you. Are you hearing me? And so initially after the fall, there's a lot of attention given their naked condition, and it seems as if that's preventing Adam and Eve from experiencing a union, this mem, a union in the womb with the voice of the Messiah. And so I had to ask myself, okay, it seems as if that they have rejected, they've hidden themselves from the voice, and so they're rejecting a union with Yahweh. And if you reject it, listen to me carefully, because every one of us have been guilty, all the while beating our chests and saying that we are servants of the Most High. Are you hearing me? What we've done is that we have hid ourselves because of our naked condition, and if you'll hold on, you'll find out why. And so Adam and Eve, it seems as if, have allowed the focus on their naked condition to keep them from making teshuvah, and I had to ask myself, okay, where's the plan of Yahweh now? And so I'm fast forward back to where I'm at with this Torah portion, Mishpatim, the giving of the law and the judgments. And I had to ask myself, listen to me, I'm just going to put it out to you. Is it possible that what's happening with the Mishpatim and the giving of the commandments, the law, the Torah, the ketuvah, is it possible that they were the device or the mechanism that Yahweh provided Adam and Israel as a means for reconciliation, as a means for restoration to their original pristine Edenic condition prior to the fall? I submit wholeheartedly, yes and amen. You disagree? Listen to this. Let's look at this word Mishpatim. The root of it, shaphat, has the same numeric value, 389. Brittany talked about this last week, as the phrase Bain Ha'arabim, translated between the evenings. Last Sabbath, she shared with us that it was the time of the evening sacrifice. It's some translate it as between the evenings, evening being high noon and dusk. So sometime between 12 and 6, which would have been around 3 p.m., the evening sacrifice. Also, the Passover lamb would have been slain. I submit to you that it would have also been the same time that the voice would have been found walking in the garden in the cool of the day, setting in motion a precedent for the restoration of Adam and Eve, offering them leniency, offering them an opportunity to hear the voice and be restored. And yet they said, no. We're going to hide ourselves because we're naked. Are you hearing me? Bain ha'arabim. It's interesting because that Hebrew word bain is translated as between, but it also can indicate to give understanding, to cause you to see, and in seeing, perceive it, understand it, your intellect is enhanced. And so I had to ask you, now can you see the two-letter root stem in arabim? See that pun? Y'all miss that one. The phrase between the evenings, arabim, do you see the ayin resh root, the same root in the word naked, in that phrase, the evenings, ha-arabim? Can you see that? The root of it is the word ereah, which is a Hebrew word that indicates the onset of darkness. Oh, wait a minute. Yahweh dwells in thick darkness. Is it possible that the lamb's sacrifice, the introduction in chapter 3 of the voice, is it possible that it was timed specifically as a reminder that Yahweh himself would have to dwell in thick darkness, which is a euphemism here for this body of flesh that would become a cloak or a shield for the light? And so here at Mount Sinai, when Moshe is seeing Yahweh himself dwelling in thick darkness, Moshe didn't go blind. I believe what Moshe is seeing is literally the light of the world himself being housed in a pre-fall body, a glorified body like you would have seen at the Mount of Transfiguration. Does that make sense to you? He came to dwell in the flesh just like Adam did. And listen to me carefully. It is very apparent. Go back and read. I want you to pay attention because this may rub your fur backwards. Isaiah 53 tells us that the Messiah suffered, and that Messiah's visage was marred, and that he was not comely. In other words, it says in the Hebrew language that he was not a handsome man. And so it leads me to believe that Yeshua came in a body. If his body aged, his body was not perfect. His flesh was not perfect if it aged. And so he did not come in a flesh that was perfect, but he came and brought perfection in the flesh. Those sound similar, but they're entirely different. And so I have to ask you again, if it's not the flesh that he came to initially restore, then perhaps it was to gain control over the mind, which would then ensure a restoration of flesh. That's the order of resurrection. Your flesh can never be resurrected. Your flesh will never be restored as long as you have a carnal mind. That is going to hurt. Can y'all hold on? I've got a few more. I'm trying to get it within 30 minutes. And it looks like after the fall that there's sort of like a do-over that takes place. And as we fast forward here to Mount Sinai, you see that Yahweh's chosen to envelop himself in light. I believe that he literally presents himself in a skin of the flesh, which I proposed to you indicates a fleshly veil, the same mechanism that the Messiah, the vile man, would later be introduced into the earth. He came in the flesh of the Adam. His flesh would hide. His flesh would contain the light. It would literally be thick darkness, which is light slowed down compared to the original light garment, in order that Yahweh could manifest himself on Mount Sinai, introduce himself to Moshe and Israel as the Mashiach. And I believe by doing so, he's preparing both Moshe and his bride for the marriage union that's about to occur. And as such, the children of Israel accepted the commandment, saying, all that you have said we will do, in effect declaring, we are willing to be found naked with you, and we will not be ashamed. Hallelujah. I'm looking at this and I thought, is it possible that there's some sort of bias, maybe some sort of limitation on the King James translators that cause them to translate thick darkness? When I hear thick darkness, I'm thinking about a real thick fog or a smoke that's so dark that I can't see the entity that's inside of it. Are you hearing me? Or is it possible that the utter fail, that language is actually indicating that Moshe is being shown the light himself? The light who would be cloaked, shielded inside a fleshly body. And is it possible that the separation that the light there kind of helped separate the nakedness of the being from Moshe's sight? Is it possible that Moshe's actually seeing Messiah Yeshua himself in his glorified body before he was introduced through the veil of Miriam's flesh? What is happening here? I have to ask you, what's happening here? There's a connection to the nakedness and shame of Adam and Ishah. And yet there's a focus on restoring them to a naked and not ashamed condition. And the restoration process involves bringing Israel to a naked and shameless relationship. And if we're not careful, it seems as if it's contradicting something that already transpired. And it does. The Torah never contradicts itself. Let me share something with you. The Torah and the Mishpatim restore Israel, Adam, to a shameless, naked, intimate position. And it has not changed. You can be naked and not ashamed and never have to hide yourself from the presence of your King. The King James indicates, if you look at that word for shame, the two both were naked, arom, and ashamed, or not ashamed, bush. The King James says that shame comes as a result of one having sinned or done a wrong of sorts. But it doesn't fit the Genesis 3 pattern. The word for shame, bush, indicates to fall into disgrace through failure of self, to lose trust of self, but it can also indicate to be confounded and brought to confusion. And if you initially look at it, we say, well, Adam was brought to shame because he did fail, because of a failure of self. Am I right? But I also submit to you that because of that failure, Adam was brought into confusion and he was totally confounded by his circumstances. Does that make sense? And as a result, Adam does not say, we've covered this already, but repetition helps you to get it. Adam did not say, I hid myself because of sin. He says to Yahweh himself, I hid myself because I was naked. And this blew my mind. If he's truly naked here in Genesis chapter 3, he's in the same condition he was in before his sin. And now, all of a sudden, he's citing his naked as his reason for hiding rather than pointing at the sin. Something's not right here. Is it possible that we've misunderstood what the Hebrew word arom meant, the Hebrew word for naked? Our English minds immediately connote to be naked, to be bare without clothes, like my legs naked. See what I'm saying? And if you go back, the King James translators, I'm going to show you something that is going to blow your mind. You want your mind blown? The King James translators usually translate arom, Strong's number 6174, as nude in most instances. But the same word in Genesis chapter 2 regarding Adam and Eve being naked and not ashamed, and then in chapter 3 where it says we hid because of our nakedness, that same word is used in a description of the Nakash, the serpent. He's described by the same word. And so you could say, well, if you read it in the King James English, it says that the serpent was more subtle than all the beasts of the field. The word subtle there is the word odorom. And so you could say that the serpent was more naked than all of the other beasts of the field. Right? That's how the King James translators would normally translate. But instead they translate it as subtle. That same word for nakedness then could indicate a crafty, cunning, guile, wily, prudent, to be able to extract and apply wisdom. And so I could say that Adam and Eve were in a condition where they were now cunning and crafty, that wisdom had been accorded them because of a circumstance. And so now that they're, instead of hiding themselves because they have no clothes on, they're hiding themselves because they have a cunning, subtle, crafty wisdom or knowledge that has been given them. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Hello? And if you look at how that's used back in Genesis chapter 3, it almost is a connotation of negativity. But I want to show you the same word used, Proverbs chapter 15, verse 5. A fool despises his father's instructions. Say amen, Joy. Say amen, BJ. A fool despises his father's instructions. Listen to this. But he that regards reproof or correction is prudent. That word prudent is a wrong. The individual that gives credence to correction and reproof is naked. Proverbs 19:25. Strike somebody that's a mocker, and those that are inexperienced will learn a lesson. That's the word odorom. If there's someone causing division, and you as a leader deal with that individual that's causing division, those that are inexperienced become naked as a result. Rebuke the discerning, and he becomes naked. I'm thinking, wait a second, there's something going on here with this naked condition, and maybe it's because of our perception. It's kept me from properly understanding why Yahweh is giving Israel a chance to be restored with the ketubah and the Mishpatim. Maybe we can understand it a little better. Adam and Eve's physical naked condition wasn't the same after the fall. It seems as if that they were simply bereft or without clothes. That's what it seems like in the context. But if you look at the context in Genesis chapter 3, in particular vis-a-vis that serpent, the serpent was more naked than all the other beasts. I'm thinking, wait a second. Wait a second. The translators translated it as subtle, crafty, cunning, prudent, wise. It seems as if when you look at that word odorom, it's actually more connected to the state of mind, their soul, and its ability or lack thereof to exhibit purity, holiness, and perfection. And so they are absent that ability, and because they're absent of that ability, they are made ashamed. That word shame, bush, hints at confusion or to be confounded. Are you seeing now there may be a different connection? What happens with Adam and Eve, the reason that they hide themselves from Abba and reject his offer of teshuvah, the leniency that is being offered by the voice, is because they are confounded. They cannot think correctly. They cannot reason the word appropriately. And as a result, they choose instead to give place to the carnal lusts of their flesh. There is now no longer a cloak or a shielding device around their minds that protects the seed of the Torah in them. Now you have the answer to the conundrum. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Messiah Yeshua. Why would I need the mind of Messiah? Because it takes that perfection of his word to be disseminated into this fleshly body to enable this fleshly body to achieve perfection, not vice versa. Are you hearing me? It seems then, listen to me carefully, that the issue is not so much their carnal flesh that came as a result of the sin, but the carnal mind that causes us to become naked and ashamed. I can then cover myself with a fig leaf, and if that voice comes to offer leniency and I make teshuvah, then my mind can be restored to its original Edenic condition. Romans 12, 1 and 2. On the other hand, listen to me carefully, if my mind is naked, there's no shield around my mind is perverse, then I will hide myself from his voice, from his word. And if in that condition I attempt to ascend the altar into his presence in such a naked condition, there's where I fall. Why? Yahweh said in Exodus chapter 20, do not attempt to ascend my altar with your naked condition. Do you know that is found here in Genesis chapter 3? The voice comes to restore Yahweh and to teach us how to renew our minds that we might demonstrate a relationship with Yahweh by how we Mishpatim judge others. See, the way that I handle my relationship with you and vice versa will expose whether I'm naked and not ashamed or naked and have to hide myself from the voice of Yahweh. Genesis chapter 3 says, they take a fig leaf and they clothe themselves. Remember that? The word there for fig is te'enah, and it's translated fig, naturally. But that tav prefix is a third person future tense. You shall, he shall. The aleph nun hey anah root indicates to seek an occasion or an occurrence. The word for leaf there is the word ele, which is the same word as olah, to go up or ascend unto Yahweh. And it's the same root that's used there in Exodus chapter 20 when he says, don't try and ascend up my altar if you're naked. Are you seeing that? And so what's happening here is that Adam and Eve thought that they could simply cover their naked flesh and go up for Yahweh with a carnal mind. I adjure you by the word of Yahweh that you cannot ascend up unto the altar of the Most High and bring a gift to Him, offer sacrifice to Him with a mind that is bent towards carnal lust. That's exactly what happens in Exodus 20:26. When Yahweh tells them, neither shall you go up by steps, ma'alah, the mem, the womb covered by the Allah, the fig leaf. Don't come up to my altar with your loins covered with a fig leaf, because if your mind is not restored, your nakedness will be discovered upon my altar. Romans chapter 12, 1 and 2 says, I beseech you. That's not begging you. That's not, come on, no. Yahweh's serving you an admonition. He says, I beseech you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of Yahweh, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto Yahweh, which is your reasonable service. And don't be conformed to the world. Put your fig leaf down. But be transformed. If you want to get in a place where you can enjoy the leniency of the teshuvah, then you're going to have to be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is the good, acceptable, and perfect will of Yahweh. What is the will of Yahweh? That sons of Elohim be produced in the earth. Why would I present my body to Yahweh if not for the opportunity to be impregnated with His word? But if my mind is not renewed, my flesh will give birth to corruption. If my mind is renewed, on the other hand, I will produce incorrupt seed. This is the law of Genesis, reproducing after its kind. Adam and Eve rejected that. Proverbs 21:27, the sacrifice of the wicked is an abomination. How much more when he brings it with a wicked mind? Your mind that is uncloaked, not shielded by the word of Yahweh, a carnal mind makes you naked and ashamed before the Most High, and you will have to hide yourself. Thus, to be naked and not ashamed seems to hint at an ability to think as Yahweh thinks, to not fall prey to the lusts of the flesh. Listen to me. I'm about to get into your business. Everybody pay attention. If you miss this, you missed it. To not fall prey to the lusts of the flesh. It reveals that we can trust ourselves. Let me back up. To be naked and not ashamed hints at an ability to think as Yahweh would think, so that we don't fall prey to the lusts of the flesh. It reveals that we can trust ourselves and thus be trusted by Yahweh and others. Listen to me carefully. If you struggle with trusting other people, it's not so much a specific sin in your life as much as it is a naked condition. Your mind is not shielded by the word of Yahweh. You are falling prey to the fiery darts of the enemy, and you're failing to cast those things down. And thus, you cannot trust yourself to control your own flesh, your own mind, and therefore you cannot trust other people's. If you can control your mind, turn to your neighbor, tell them, you better get this one. If you can control your mind, your flesh has no choice but to submit. This is the battleground of eternity. Adam and Eve would rather have gratified the lusts of their mind than gird up the loins of their mind. It's easy to put on a fig leaf for a naked condition in the flesh, but to clothe your mind with the word of Yahweh is the key to making true teshuvah. Torah and Mishpatim reveal your true naked condition. If you're willing to allow the Mishpatim, the Torah of Yahweh, to transform your mind becomes shielded by the word of Yahweh. Your mind is encloaked by the word of Yahweh. You can dwell in that thick darkness, that naked, pristine condition where there's no shame, and you can demonstrate the light of His presence in your life. You are children of the light. Walk in the light. Wherefore, gird up the loins of your mind, be sober, and hope to the end for the grace that is brought unto you by the revelation of Yeshua. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Messiah Yeshua. And we're finishing with just a couple more. After speaking to the people here, ascending the mountain to receive the written ketubah, he comes back down and finds them naked and ashamed again. Exodus 32:25. But there's a subtle nuance, a subtle difference here. Can you hold on? The word here for naked is not arum. It's the root of the word for paro, pharaoh. It's the word para. That word para can indicate to loosen your hair. And in that particular season, if a woman was called in adultery, a harlot, she would be forced to unloose her hair in the public forum, and then her head would be shaved. But this word para here, the word for naked, indicates to ignore, to be loosened of restraint. You know what Yahweh's word does? It restrains the animal, carnal passions and lusts. It indicates to reject counsel. The word for shame here is not the word bush. It's the word shimsa, which indicates a whispering derision, which was the choice tactic of the serpent and of Adam and of Chava, because they chose to reject the counsel of Yahweh. It is that condition that makes one naked and in shame. Isaiah 26:3 says, Yahweh speaking, you will keep the mind that is dependent on you in perfect shalom. Why? Because it is trusting in you. I want to share with you the two greatest commandments that connect us with the giving of the 10 words, the law, and the Mishpatim. Mark chapter 12, verse 30 and 31. And thou shalt love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, with all your soul, and don't worry about your mind. Excuse me? Isn't that amazing? Romans chapter 12, don't be conformed to the world, but be transformed by the removing of your mind. Excuse me? Renewing of your mind. Love Him with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your strength. Why do you think He puts that in here? Because He's wanting you to take up the terms of the wedding contract and re-shield your mind. This is where I need the shield against the fiery darts. If you read Ephesians chapter 4, when it talks about the sword of His word and the shield of His faith and the breastplate of righteousness, and it talks about having your mind shielded with the helmet of salvation, teshuvah. Why? Because I understand that without it, I'm in a naked and shamed condition. And so my mind is being renewed, and I am not going to fall prey to the carnal lusts of the flesh. The moment that you hear this kind of stuff, you're assaulted by fiery darts. The enemy sends thoughts into your mind to assail you to get you off Yahweh's word. The second commandment's like this. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. That's a summation of Mishpatim. Why do you think Yahweh put that in there? It's because the Torah and the Mishpatim together restore the mind. They cloak the mind in a shield of light. They cloak the mind and bring you back into the original naked and unashamed condition, the Edenic condition that is rightfully yours. You don't have to dwell in a perfect fleshly body, but you can be perfect in this fleshly body, and it's that seed that will be planted into the ground and allow you to be resurrected at the voice that comes walking in the cool of the day. Hope you've enjoyed this teaching. Shabbat Shalom.